guys, so today I'm going to be talking about the Katherine Anne Porter story, The Jilting of Granny Weatherall. And this was a handout that was linked, it's a Word document, to our course Moodle page. So we'll start with the title, The Jilting of Granny Weatherall. The word jilting refers to being rejected or abandoned. Then weatherall, if you talk about a product or a person that can weather all, it means someone or something that can put up with any circumstance or any situation. You'll see we have a guest lecturer back in the corner. She may speak up every once in a while. There's actually two others in the room with me. So moving from there, let's talk about the characters. So our protagonist in the story, our main character, is Granny Weatherall. She is unfortunately in this story sitting on her dying bed. She is, in order of appearance, first greeted by Dr. Harry, who is her physician, of no other relationship to her than being her physician. Then we have Cornelia, who is Granny's daughter, and Granny is living with Cornelia. Granny's other children are Lydia, Jimmy, and Hapsy. Lydia and Jimmy we know are living. Hapsy, we're not so sure. It seems that she may have died during childbirth, and I'll explain why later. From there, Granny talks about two of her previous men in her life, John and George. We find out that John is her husband and the father of her children, and George is the man who left her at the altar. And then finally we have Father Conley, who is the priest who was to possibly marry Granny when she was left at the altar, and is here at her deathbed at the final moments of her life. So those are the characters. Now the perspective of the story. The story shifts between the present and the past. So in the present, what we have happening is Granny is on her dying bed, her family is gathering around her, and then Granny passes at the end of the story. When Granny is laying there, she starts thinking about the things that she would do, and she starts thinking about her past and all the things that she's been through. So she remembers her past with her family and raising her children and the struggles that she went through with that. She remembers being left at the altar, and she also remembers Hapsy's birth. So those two things are happening at the same time. It's kind of talking about Granny's life while her life is ending. So next, I'm going to go through a couple of passages that may be confusing for you or are pretty important to understanding the story. And the first one is on page 3 of the handout, and it's toward the bottom of the page. And I'm going to read bits and pieces of this. So it begins with, there they were, made out of her, and they couldn't get away from that. So she's talking about her children being made from her, and they can't escape that. Sometimes she wanted to see John again and point to them and say, well, I didn't do so badly, did I? But that would have to wait. That was for tomorrow. So she's talking about how proud she is of her children and what they've become and who they are as adults. We see that possibly, since she's saying I didn't do so bad, that possibly John had passed kind of previously while the children were still growing up, and that'll be explained a little bit more in the next bit of this passage. We also see her mention tomorrow, and this isn't the first time she mentions tomorrow. Throughout the story, the idea of tomorrow is present, and that can mean the future. It can also mean whatever's going to happen after she passes. And it just means like moving forward into whatever is to come. So she's talking about John next, and it says she used to think of him as a man, But now all the children were older than their father, and he would be a child beside her if she saw him now. It seemed strange that there was something wrong in the idea, why he couldn't possibly recognize her. She had fenced in 100 acres once, digging up the post holes herself and clamping the wires with just a boy to help. That changed a woman. So this gives us a little bit of context of where she is. So we're in the South. Gives us a little bit of context of when this is happening by the terms that she's using. But it also tells us that John had passed, like if her children now are older than the age he was when he passed. And it tells us a little bit about the effect that had on her. She had to take on responsibilities that she wouldn't have otherwise taken on, and that changed her and who she is from the girl that she was when they were together. So moving on, she kind of talks about different hardships, and she talks about sitting up with the children and the animals when they were sick. And she says, John, I hardly lost one of them. John would see that in a minute. That would be something he could understand. She wouldn't have to explain anything. So she's saying that, like, once I see him, once we're face to face again tomorrow, he's going to understand that. And he's going to love me. And we're going to be together. And it's going to be good. So later on in that page, she talks about lighting lamps. And this is something that occurs a couple of times in the story. In fact, when Granny passes, she talks about the light from the lamp. So again, on page 4, about the middle of the page, lighting the lamps had been beautiful. The children huddled up to her and breathed like little calves waiting at the bars in the twilight. Their eyes followed the match, and they watched the flame rise and settle in the blue curve. And then they moved away from her. The lamp was lit, and they didn't have to be scared and hang on to their mother anymore. Never, never, never more. God, for all my life I thank thee. Without thee, my God, I could have never done it. Hail Mary, full of grace. So the lamps are a symbol of like light and bringing light into the world, and making it so that you don't have to be afraid, that you don't have to live in the darkness. And she's talking about this, and she's so grateful that her children can move forward and they don't have to depend on her for their security any longer. Then at the bottom of the page, it says, but he had not come just the same. What does a woman do when she has put on the white veil and set out the white cake for a man and he doesn't come? Later in that paragraph, about the middle of that paragraph, it says, for 60 years she had prayed against remembering him and against losing her soul in the deep pit of hell. And now two things were mingled in one, and the thought of him was a smoky cloud from hell that moved and crept in her head. So now she's moving from thinking about John and thinking about her life with her children into thinking about George and being left at the altar, as well as meeting him again, and what she had thought about that previously and what she thinks about that now. And she compares the thought of him to a smoky cloud from hell that moved and crept in her head. So moving from the pleasant thoughts about, oh, John will see me and John will recognize me and know me and love me, to George, it feels like it feels like literal hell to think of the idea of seeing him now. Moving from there, on page 6, this is still kind of on that same thought. It says, yes, she had changed her mind after 60 years and she would like to see George. I want you to find George. Find him and be sure to tell him I forgot him. Then later it says, tell him I was given back everything he took away and more. And then she goes on and she's talking to John and she says, yes, John, get the doctor now. No more talk. My time has come. So this is the first time that we hear the my time has come. And this is referring to her saying, okay, I'm ready to go now. My time has come to leave the earth. What's interesting then is page 7, 3/4 of the way down. It says, so there was nothing to worry about anymore, except sometimes in the night, one of the children screamed in a nightmare, and they both hustled out, shaking and hunting for matches and calling. There, wait a minute, here we are. John, get the doctor now. Hapsy's time has come. But there was Hapsy standing by the bed in a white cap. Cornelia, tell Hapsy to take off her cap. I can't see her plain. So we have that time has come, like Hapsy's time has come, but then it says she's standing by the bed in a white cap. The idea is that her time has come, like her time came to pass, and her standing by the bed in the white cap is kind of like a baby's bonnet that a baby would wear, kind of telling us that she is, they lost her as a child or as a baby. There's different theories about it, and if you read or look at different videos about it, you'll probably get different interpretations of that. But that's the passage that they're referring to. So, moving from there, the last thing I want to look at is the very end on page 9. It says, and this is again like how we kind of know that Hapsy is past. It says, you'll see Hapsy again. What about her? I thought you'd never come. Granny had made a long journey outward, looking for Hapsy. What if I don't find her? What then? Her heart sank down and down. There was no bottom to death, and she couldn't come to the end of it. Again, the lamp. The blue light from Cornelia's lampshade drew into a tiny point in the center of her brain. It flickered, winked like an eye, and quietly it fluttered and dwindled. Granny laid curled within herself, amazed and watchful, staring at the point of light that was herself. Her body was now only a deeper mass of shadow in an endless darkness, and this darkness would curl around the light and swallow it up. God give a sign. The last paragraph. For the second time, there was no sign. Again, no bridegroom and the priest in the house. She could not remember any other sorrow because this grief wiped them all away. Oh no, there's nothing more cruel than this. I'll never forgive it. She stretched herself with a deep breath and blew out the light. So what this is saying is that she gets to the end and it's like that light becomes just a point, which becomes her, and she moves into tomorrow and there's nothing there. All this hope of like meeting up with Hapsy, meeting up with John, and there's nothing there. So something for you to consider moving forward is, what ways was Granny jilted? In what instance was she rejected or abandoned throughout this story? Because it's happened more than once and she's had to weather it all. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.